It happens on a Sunday in late September, the kind of American afternoon when the sky looks photoshopped and the church lots empty out into brunch lines that snake around patios strung with Edison bulbs. I'm gliding past the corner of Maple and 7th in a car so quiet it feels like a rumor. Diamond-stitched leather, glass roof, a dashboard that looks like mission control, and an exhaust note that exists only in the marketing brochure. The badge on the hood is a silver animal frozen mid-pounce, the kind of emblem that says, "Hi, I'm here to apologize for your childhood." I see her before she sees me. Ashley, my ex, my cheating wife, my one-woman crash course in betrayal economics. She's standing with the guy who replaced me for a season. Jawline like a billboard, shoulder seams screaming, personal trainer or real estate. There's a split second where my brain wants to downshift into the old story, the toxic love, the infidelity that turned our family into a group project graded on a curve. But the car won't let me. It's whisper quiet and a little smug, like a therapist who bills in 6-minute increments. It glides. I glide. 2 years ago, Ashley laughed at my old Crown Vic right in front of her friends, called it a cop retirement plan with rust, and made a joke about how every time I started it, an ice cap cried. People laughed because cruelty is a group sport when the cocktails are $20. I didn't say anything. I drove home holding the wheel like a prayer. That night, after the laughter, the late-arriving evidence of cheating. American infidelity has a way of dressing itself in athleisure and meal prep. Ours wore Apple Watch notifications and private Instagram stories. People say adultery is about sex, but it's really about math. The subtraction of attention, the division of loyalties, the multiplication of lies, and eventually the long division of the bank account. I learned it all at once, the way you learn about gravity, by missing a step in the dark. Now the light catches the curve of the fender like a wink. I'm not flooring it, because revenge is best served at the speed limit. They don't wave me down. They freeze the way deer do when the world tilts. Her eyes flicker to the hood ornament, to the wheels, to me. She does a fast, involuntary inventory, watch, haircut, posture, and I can feel her trying to reconcile the spreadsheet. Old car, old husband, old life. New car, new man, new math. There's a tiny wind inside the cabin that smells like cedar, and another chance. I don't honk. I don't even look long. The luxury ride passes her by like a sentence she didn't finish reading. You think this is a car story? It isn't. Cars are just how Americans narrate class without saying the quiet part out loud. This is a story about recalibration. How humiliation hits the starter, how betrayal floods the cylinder, how a man learns that the engine you rebuild first is your name. If you want the clean version, stop here. The cheating wife laughed at his old car, he retooled his life, and one day he drifted past her like a ghost in stitched leather. But the clean version leaves out the conspiracy of circumstances, the parody of the modern dealership, the fantasy under the hood. It leaves out what the DMV whispered, what the HOA threatened, what the Crown Vic confessed when I swore I could hear it talk. It leaves out the American dream the way we actually live it, with coupons, grace, caffeine, and a little bit of petty. I tap the paddle shifter just to feel something, and the screen blooms into a map of our town. Costco like a temple, Little League diamonds like crop circles, the Starbucks drive-thru like a pilgrimage route. The infotainment voice has the warm confidence of a news anchor. Next light, turn right. That voice was not in my first life. In my first life, there was the asphalt cough of an engine with 180,000 miles and the tinny radio my dad installed with a butter knife. In my first life, I would have braked, rolled the window down, explained myself like a lawyer, and begged like a poet. In this life, I keep rolling because the math has changed. I have learned that the best revenge is not making someone else feel small. It's making yourself so whole that their absence is just another open lane. The car's heads-up display floats a speed number on the windshield like a clean conscience. The chapel bells at St. Joe's toss their bright coins into the air. A woman on a patio holds her mimosa like a participation trophy. Here is the reverse-engineered truth, told out of order because order is a luxury none of us can afford during a crisis. Somewhere between the night I discovered the messages and the morning a repo truck hauled away a different man's leased SUV, I realized my life was a road story and I'd been treating it like a cul-de-sac. Somewhere between the moment my cheating wife laughed at my old car and this glide-by, I decided that nothing silent is empty. Some silences are full. If you still need a clean thesis sentence, put this in your notes app. In a nation where we measure ourselves by miles and models, I learned to measure myself by miles only. But first, we have to go backward into the smoke and the paperwork and the awful comedy of it, because in America, the punchline is always hiding in the fine print. The pass has already happened. Now let me tell you why it was inevitable. The Crown Vic's name was Gloria, because I inherited it from my Aunt Gloria, who believed air fresheners were an appropriate replacement for therapy. The car was a retired fleet special with a trunk that could swallow a Thanksgiving. It had a suspiciously authoritative stance, and the kind of groan when starting that made neighbors check their registrations. People gave me space on the highway because we all fear our past catching up in our rear view. I drove Gloria to school every day, the place where I taught American history to kids who could tell you the serial numbers of their favorite sneakers, but not 2 clauses of the Constitution. After last bell, I drove DoorDash so the mortgage didn't go into witness protection. This is not a sob story. This is just how you do family in a town that says, support small business with its mouth and shops at warehouses with its wallet. Ashley used to love the Crown Vic. She said it felt like a cop movie and blasted Springsteen with the windows down, hair flying like we were borrowing someone else's youth. Then the calculus of comparison set in, the algorithm of other people's lives. A new woman at her office had a husband with a cabin and an Escalade that looked like a glacier. Suddenly, our car was a confession. The laughter started small, with a joke about breaking for budget. It got bigger in rooms where I was invited, but not really expected to speak. Wine nights with women who could reverse engineer a man's net worth from his belt buckle. One night, Ashley stood next to Gloria and told her friends that the car had strong divorced energy, like she was auditioning for a show about toxic love with witty one-liners. Then she stared at me to see if I'd flinch. I didn't. I just felt something rearranged behind my ribs, a toolbox falling off a shelf. The infidelity arrived the way most infidelity does, by courier text and a sudden gym schedule. I found messages I wasn't supposed to see because the universe loves slapstick. The phone fell between couch cushions. I was fishing for the remote. A preview lit up like a flare. A photo at a rooftop bar I'd never heard of. A caption about finally being seen. The man had the kind of face you get when handsome becomes a hobby. He sold houses with quartz countertops and big promises about school districts. His car was aggressive luxury, LEDs like a sneer, exhaust that sounded like a podcast about itself. There were hotels disguised as team building. There were passwords that become paper cuts. There was the moment I asked a normal question and her answer came back like the wrong key in your own door. I played dumb for a few weeks because I wanted to see if the show would confess itself. People think cheating is about sex. It's often about staging. The playlists, the reservations, the cologne-like citrus resignations. I found myself narrating our life like a true crime podcast. Episode 3. The Laughter. Episode 4. The Timeline. Episode 5. The Receipt in the Pocket that tells the whole story because the universe has a sense of humor. It wasn't rage right away. It was insult, like being downgraded on a flight you paid for. I went to the garage and sat in Gloria and turned the key and listened to the old girl rattle herself awake. I swear I heard her clear her throat and say, "So this is happening." When the confrontation came, it came American, on a Saturday after errands with Target bags still in the trunk. I said I knew, and she did the whole civic ritual: deny, deflect, dissolve. Then she admitted it like people admit they don't recycle, with a shrug. She said words about being suffocated, about needing to feel alive, about how my schedule made her feel like a roommate. She said it wasn't about money or cars, and then said a sentence that was exactly about money and cars. The house went quiet like a court before the verdict. She moved out a week later, which is to say she moved into his condo with the open-plan kitchen and a balcony staged for sunsets. She took the mid-century lamp and left the coffee maker because betrayal is mostly logistics. The first nights alone were loud. The dishwasher sounded like judgment. ESPN was a dull roar. I used to drown out paperwork. I called my mom and said the word infidelity like a medical diagnosis. The neighbors brought over lasagna like we'd had a funeral. In a way, we had. Our story had died. We were just arguing about the autopsy. She posted pictures with captions that read like outtakes from a self-help book. I chose me. She meant she chose him. The realtor boyfriend took her to steakhouses where the knives had their own napkins. He took her to car meets where men measured themselves with tape measures made of chrome. I kept driving Gloria, who kept whispering, "You're fine," every time the transmission stuttered. Then came the humiliation crescendo, a party at a friend's house where the driveway was a red carpet for SUVs. I pulled up in Gloria and saw Ashley on the porch. She laughed in a way that requested accomplices. "Still driving that thing?" she said, like a host on a game show announcing the consolation prize. I felt my face arrange itself into a polite mask. People parted like a safety drill. I parked on the street and watched my reflection in the window wobble with the glass. Later, when I tried to leave, I turned the key and Gloria coughed, then died. I could feel every eye on me. A man I barely knew offered to give me a jump, the way a priest offers last rites. Ashley looked down at her phone and didn't. It wasn't the worst moment of the betrayal, but it was the moment that put everything on a single headline. His cheating wife laughed at his old car. And that is how you start to rewrite a man. Grief is a mechanic. It takes you apart and lays your parts on a towel. Then it waits to see if you know how to put yourself back together. I started with small screws. I sold furniture we didn't need. I took extra periods at school. I drove DoorDash until the smell of pad thai lived in my jacket. Then I added Uber to the mix and learned the cartography of our town in a higher resolution. Who tips? Who prays? Who leaves glitter? The Crown Vic became my confessional booth, and I started to hear things. Not voices, opinions. The car had them. When a fare dragged a suitcase across the bumper, Gloria muttered, "Boundaries." When I passed the dealership row, she hummed like a person holding a secret. I rolled with it because fantasy is just a way of letting the brain practice hope. Rideshare at 2 a.m. is where America tells itself the truth. One night I picked up a guy in a suit who smelled like a scented candle called alimony. He worked in finance and said, apropos of nothing, the dealership F&I office is where dreams go to finance themselves. He explained the secret society behind the glass, how extended warranties are spells cast in fluorescent light, how money factors are the runes of the underworld, how the true Illuminati wear name tags and say, "Let me talk to my manager." I started to treat the dealer row like a temple and took notes. If betrayal had a sanctuary, it was the place where people bought symbols to cover stories they couldn't fix. Another night, a woman with a tattoo of a wrench on her wrist said she flipped cars out of her driveway and told me about auctions huddled under sodium lamps where men in hoodies bid on dented histories. "You can read a Carfax like a palm," she said. "Accidents, owners, where it lived, cars keep diaries." I started to haunt those auctions with a notepad and a thermos. Gloria liked it. She hummed approval when I passed on a pretty lemon. I learned to smell flood cars, to spot paint lines, to hear the difference between a belt complaining and a belt warning you. Then the letter arrived, a class action check for a defect that had haunted 1,000,000 engines, including mine. It wasn't life-changing money, it was permission. I paid off the last of a credit card and used the rest to buy a wrecked hybrid at auction. I spent nights watching YouTube priests with shop towels draped over their shoulders. I rebuilt the battery cells at my workbench, hands black to the wrist, and when the car lit up without errors, I felt a temple bell ring in my chest. I flipped that hybrid for a profit. Then another. Then another. I became the lemon whisperer, not a dealer, but the guy who found cars that deserved another life and matched them to people who deserved a break. Parity arrived via the DMV. People imagine it as a gray building full of sighs. Our DMV is a theater at the edge of town where dreams line up for paperwork. The lady at window 4 wore readers on a chain and dispensed wisdom with stickers. "Always photograph your title before you hand it to anyone," she said. People forget. Paper remembers. She gave me a number like a lottery ticket and a look that said, "Don't be a fool." I wasn't. I built an LLC with a name that sounded like a rock band and a storage unit that smelled like rubber and redemption. Meanwhile, the HOA, the weird little legislature of our cul-de-sac, sent letters about the Crown Vic's oil spots like I was committing treason. I sent back pictures of other people's trash cans left out on Wednesdays. It became a cold war of petty, and petty is a fuel if you keep the mixture lean. The neighbors started bringing me their broken-hearted cars. I fixed them and charged fairly. I made friends with the guy at O'Reilly's who gives discounts if you talk to him about fishing. I added a side gig, consulting for people terrified of F&I. I went with them to dealerships and sat at the desk like a lawyer in a leather jacket and said no, no, no until the price matched reality. In return, people told me secrets. A repo agent told me where cars go to be forgotten. A tow truck driver told me where marriages go to pretend they're fine. And then the ridiculous happened, because America loves a montage. A venture capitalist I'd driven to the airport needed a fixer for a battery recycling startup pilot program. "You work cheap," he said. "You show up. You don't talk nonsense." I said yes. I moved pallets. I translated engineer into English. I brought donuts like a diplomat. When the pilot hit its numbers, I got a bonus that made me sit down on the curb and laugh until I cried. It wasn't Ferrari money. It was dignity money. That's the kind that lasts. I took Gloria for one more long drive at dusk and told her, "It's time." She didn't argue. I put her up for sale with a description that read like a eulogy. A young dad bought her for cash and said his wife liked old cop cars. I watched her taillights fade and felt like I'd retired a soldier. Then I went to a dealership I'd been casing for months, walked past the balloons and the espresso machine, and ordered the car that would not announce itself so much as arrive. No add-ons, no nitrogen tires, no low jack. I signed with a pen that felt like a small sword. When the salesman tried to sell me PPF named after a superhero, I said, "My therapist is cheaper." He laughed, but he also took off $500. The car was delivered like a verdict. Satin cover whipped off, mirrors folded out like wings. I ran my hand along the fender like it could read my palm. The infotainment voice greeted me by name, and I swear the system recognized my phone and offered to import my playlists as if it had scouted my heart. I slid behind the wheel, and the seat adjusted like it knew my past. "Where to?" it asked, like a sly co-conspirator. "Past," I said. "Then forward." Americans think revenge is loud. We think it explodes. We think it posts. But the best revenge is a quiet car with a full tank and nowhere urgent to be. I planned the past the way people plan proposals. I knew her brunch spot. I knew her schedule because our town is a clock with predictable hands. I washed the car in my driveway and the HOA drove by slow, pretending to jog. I cued a playlist of songs we'd loved that no longer belonged to us. I wore a jacket that fit. I told my bones not to flinch. But life, allergic to scripts, added improv. As I approached the intersection, I saw a flatbed half a block down, orange lights spinning, a steel yoke like a question mark. On the curb, the realtor boyfriend argued with a man wearing a ball cap that said payment due. Ashley stood there, arms folded, every syllable of the word uncomfortable etched into her forehead. The flatbed driver didn't raise his voice. He wielded contracts. "We've been calling, sir," he said, like a kindergarten teacher addressing a very large toddler. The SUV, aggressive luxury, the one that used to snarl in our neighborhood, was halfway onto the yoke, its wheels cinched by straps like a costume caught mid-quick change. In the old life, I might have gloated so hard I sprained something. In this life, I signaled, checked my blind spot, and eased up to the light. They looked up together the way couples do when the world taps the glass. The badge on my hood blinked in the sun. The glass roof spilled daylight on my scalp like a benediction. Ashley's mouth did the arithmetic and then the punctuation. I watched her see me, really see me, not the ledger she used to balance her ego. I remembered the night my cheating wife laughed at my old car, the chorus of witnesses, the way humiliation echoes. The infotainment voice, bless her synthetic soul, whispered, "Traffic ahead is light." I almost laughed. Here is what I did not do. I did not roll down my window and weaponize a one-liner. I did not tell the tow truck driver to angle the SUV for better framing. I did not toss wisdom like a coin. I simply lifted 2 fingers off the wheel in a small American salute that can mean 100 different things, and let her choose one. Then I eased through the green and kept going. Revenge is not humiliation. Revenge is a life so intact it refuses the bait. Around the block, I pulled into a spot under a sycamore and felt my heart beat an honest rhythm. I thought about family and how the word still meant something to me, not as a nuclear brochure, but as a practice. Who you show up for, who you feed, who you call when the check engine light blinks in your chest. I thought about betrayal and how it had tried to rename me, how toxic love had tried to make scarcity my accent. I thought about the Crown Vic and the DMV lady and the finance guy and the wrench tattoo woman and how America is just people, mostly tired, trying not to drown. Then I did something deeply uncinematic. I texted my mom a photo of the dashboard and said, "Made it through." Grace gets accused of being soft. It's not. It's a torque wrench. It loosens bolts that rage cannot. A week later, I spotted Ashley alone in the cereal aisle at the grocery store, scanning price tags like someone newly acquainted with math. We did the suburban dance of pretending to compare ingredients. She started with a sigh with the clatter of guilt. "I was awful," she said, no makeup on the apology. I don't know who that person was. I knew. She was the person who laughed at a man because she forgot how to like herself. "I'm sorry," she said, and the words didn't fix anything because that's not their job, but they were a wrench on a frozen bolt. "I'm not asking for anything," she added, because we had learned. "I just wanted you to know." I nodded and told her the truest thing I had. "I hope you find something real." She almost cried, then didn't. We parted at the end caps like ships that had finally found their buoys. Later, in the parking lot, I saw her waiting at the bus stop because the condo was nearer to the line and the math was different now. For a second, I thought about pulling up, opening the door, letting her feel the leather. But grace isn't indulgence. It's boundary. I drove past, slow, a wave that meant we survived. At home, I opened the garage and let the quiet of the car fix something the noise had broken. I sat for a minute and listened to the electric ping of the cooling system, the little metallic goodnights. The voice asked if I wanted to set a destination for the morning. "No," I said. "Surprise me." It suggested the scenic route to the park where people fly kites and practice hope. I laughed because the car was better at therapy than my therapist. Then I went inside and made a grilled cheese because healing is partly calcium, and I emailed a kid from my class who wanted advice about a used Civic. We made a plan to meet at the DMV. Window 4, obviously. The town kept spinning. The HOA sent another letter, and I framed it because parody is a souvenir. The startup grew and didn't collapse, which in America counts as a miracle. The Lemon Whisperer work stayed steady, and I started a little YouTube channel to teach people how not to get roasted in the F&I office. In the comments, a kid wrote that his mom had been a cheating wife and he was scared he would become a punchline someday. I told him the algebra of betrayal doesn't have to define your math. People are not their worst sentence. Engines can be rebuilt. Classes can be retaken. Maps can be redrawn. Sometimes, on Sunday afternoons, I drive past the brunch corner just to remind myself that the pass happened and that I chose the quiet version. The light hits the hood. The badge winks. The car hums an unobjectionable hum. I think about how we advertise ourselves to each other, with cars, with watches, with posts, and how underneath the advertisement is a person, scared and tender, trying not to be alone in a world built like a freeway. I think about revenge and how it's just a detour sign pointing to a place called dignity. I think about infidelity and how it's a weather system, not a definition. I think about family and how even after the worst betrayal, it's possible to build a version of it with friends, neighbors, kids from class, a DMV clerk with stickers, and a mechanic who remembers your name. His cheating wife laughed at his old car. That's the headline people like because it's tidy and it flatters the reader with certainty. But the real story is longer, messier, funnier. It's a conspiracy of small mercies and a fantasy of second chances threaded through a parody of the systems we build to sell each other mirrors. The luxury ride passes her by. That's not the victory. The victory is that the man driving it knows he would be fine even if the car were a bus pass, a bike, a pair of good shoes. The victory is knowing the engine you rebuilt first was your heart.